Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Progressive Mindset, the podcast that covers pretty much everything, mate, right?
What are we feeling on the day?
A little bit of business, a little bit of health, anything that goes and keeps your mind progressive, I guess.
I guess it's that finding the true entrepreneur in people, right? Is what makes you tick, what makes other people tick. Talking about fear, like you said, health, maybe a bit of gut health in there. I like a bit of that.
You're into a bit of gut health. It's too complex for me.
Strategy. I mean, for those that don't know, and you'll see in the description, we've managed to do 12, 13 years working together.
Yeah. How do you create a good partnership? It's definitely going to be a future episode, I would have said.
And so we can jump straight into it, and the description will have some credentials in there as to why you should listen to anything we say. The credentials would arguably still mean you don't want to listen to anything we say, but hopefully it brings some value. It's a direct view into, I guess, our business journey together individually, what makes us tick, and hopefully a lot of people will resonate with it, and maybe there's something we've done that someone can learn from, or maybe someone listening can share something that we could learn from, because I've got plenty of learning to do.
Please do. Fantastic. So let's get into episode 1 and what episode 1 is going to be about. So we thought that a perfect place to start was fear, pain, and how
suffering,
and how entrepreneurs use fear and pain in a positive light, or can use it in a positive light, to drive business growth, both from startup through the business journey, I think.
And personal growth as well, right? There is elements we're going to talk about that I know we've spoken about this before, that I have the same fear drivers in my personal life as I do in a business capacity, and I'm quite simple when it comes to that type of thing. But you really intrigued me with something you said the other day, and I think we should start with it, and that is about creating a uncomfortable or fearful scenario and forcefully causing it to get the best out of yourself. And I think a great place to start would be somewhat around that concept.
No, I agree. And I'd actually like to roll back a little bit, and where I guess this concept of investigating fear and how people use it kind of comes from the many businesses that will grow for maybe a year, 2 years, but actually so few businesses make it to the 5-year mark. And is it, and I think a driver for many is, I've just made this leap, I've started this business, it is now going to be my source of income. I
have to make it work.
Yeah, I've left the securities behind. This now needs to carry me.
Yep.
And is it then, once it becomes comfortable, you've generated yourself an income around year 1, year 2, and actually your lifestyle is now sustained and you feel a little bit safe, is that what causes businesses to then fall off and maybe not make it?
And it's interesting, right? Because go back 13 years, we were sat in your second bedroom. I think you obviously took a big punt. I certainly took a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And there was no choice but to make it work. How did we keep that fear? So, business gets to 2-3 years and they've maybe got a couple of people, or maybe they've got some staff that are taking off a bit of load, a VA, or whatever it is. They start to get comfortable, they take a salary. I'm going to leave Friday 3:00 now, because that's what I wanted to become a business owner for. And you start taking your foot off the gas. Talking about fear in particular, 2, 3, 4 years in, we were generating some okay money. We probably could have taken our foot off the gas. What was the bit at that time that kept your foot down?
So I think we were both really quite young when the business was in its infancy, and when we got to that point, for me it was about going and buying house number 1, getting that first house, and I guess again creating financial uncertainty for myself is what almost that driving force. The same thing when you leave the job behind is you've created that again, and I think when we were discussing sort of off mic, that is it really fear if actually your business is doing okay, you can probably dip in and go and grab some more money. I think it's probably creating the uncomfortable, and I think we change from using fear as actually it becomes just uncomfortable to sit in this place that you don't want to sit in it for too long, and it drives you further forward.
Absolutely, and I think that's what everyone needs to identify what their fear is. I don't believe there is a person out there that doesn't have a fear of some kind. There is a fear of failure. Maybe it's a long-term fear, and you don't want to look bad. You don't want people to think the business failed, and we know the stats around business failures compared to business successes are overwhelmingly towards the failure metric. Everyone must have that fear, but if you don't find it, we've had long conversations about this, hence it being the first episode. But if you don't find it, you can't harness it.
I think you've got to find the fear that works for you as well, and maybe a little bit later on, I want to talk about long-term fear, short-term fear, because I think they have different. You go and pick a fear that actually plays too much havoc with your mental health, and suddenly what we're talking about here is a very different outcome. I just wanted to talk again, just to finish up in terms of keeping that going. So we talked about, okay, it was first house that caused that uncomfortable nature. I've actually managed to replicate that again. We upsized a number of years later. It was 3 years later. We upsized again to just keep in that uncomfortable nature. And
again, a bit more than what you probably should have bit off at that time. Or?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's about biting off more than you can sustain.
So it has to be achievable. But just on that line.
Yeah, for me it's about going. Whoa, are we going to be able to cover the mortgage this
but
month?
Not impossible.
Not impossible, but just to leave you in that. Well, it might happen, it might not happen. To make it it's got to be uncomfortable. For me, that works. It's uncomfortable, and I believe that's something that I'll continue to repeat because it works for me. And I think you can fake it as well. I've spoken to my partner about, hey, when later down the line in certain scenarios, how would you feel about actually downsizing to a smaller house? We'll rent this one out or something, so we can always come back. But until we hit further milestones, you can't come back into this comfortable lifestyle that you've been accustomed to. That, by the way, was shot down immediately and won't be happening. But constantly trying to generate ideas. So let's focus on your fears. Let's focus in on what you've used as drivers.
Yeah, so this gets a bit deep for me because you have your fears are here and now. You get to do the here and now. My fears, unfortunately, I can't help but look, and I think this is where we come to good dynamic partnerships, etc. This is possibly one of the reasons that we don't miss things, or hopefully, touch wood, we don't miss things. My fear is really that. Quite far out, and my fear is the fear of not achieving my potential, I guess, is the easiest way. And the negative of that for me is, well, what does that mean? There's an undefined. You've got a house or whatever. You can't afford it, but you know what number you've got to hit.
Yep.
I can't quite yet quantify what potential is in for me. So I need to have a look at that, but I want to make sure I've always fulfilled the possibilities that I think I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is I use those as tools when I get up and I think, I'm not on it today. Even today, I came in this morning, I was a little bit ropey. And I think to myself, if you don't outwork everyone else, you're not going to reach your potential. And so I use the long-term fear personally.
Okay.
If that's healthy, unhealthy, there's a debate there, I guess, in certain circumstances. But it's super interesting to see the difference between the here and now and the long term.
Yeah, I buy in. I definitely buy into the creating something that is possibly maybe 3-5 years. You drive through uncomfortable, you come out the other side of comfortable, and then you go again. It gives you that opportunity. It's like a mission in business. Is let's work towards something. Once we achieve it, then we'll come up with something else. I guess in terms of using long-term fear. So we got into a really deep and meaningful the other day talking about this. And what's the long-term impact of, hey, if you're working towards this thing for maybe 20, 30 years.
Yep.
What happens if you miss it? Like.
Well,
you
the
don't
goal,
get a
the
second
goal
go
is
around.
you don't miss it. No, it's an interesting point and something I can find. I think going back to who this is for entrepreneurs, right? I think entrepreneurs typically have a very active mind. I do. I know you do. You have an idea will come to you at 9 o'clock at night, an idea will come to you 7 o'clock in the morning, or different scenarios. You don't fully ever switch off. As much as everyone pretends you can go and have a holiday, I don't believe anyone can fully switch off. There's certain scenarios, and I'd love to talk about finding your it, and we'll come to that. But for me, I'm an overthinker, so I'm constantly thinking about that. And if I have the here and now and I keep hitting it, slowly I'll become not demoralised, but it won't feel like a far-reaching goal. I think it's borderline unhealthy if it's too far out, which mine currently is.
Okay.
But if I can translate that into the here and now, you don't know what you're coming in. As a leader, as a boss, owner, whatever you want to call it, you don't know what you're coming into that day. You could have the worst day imaginable, but the next day you've got to be on your A game because someone needs
rinse
you.
and repeat.
Someone needs you. People are relying on you, and you've got to be the best version of yourself as much as you can to a certain degree. And everyone has off days. So I'm currently tackling that personally. You know, that how do I quantify that long-term fear? But part of me doesn't want to. Part of me doesn't want to because it's seen me okay to this point.
So your driving force towards that fear is you just got to do your best at all times.
Yep.
To reach undefined
measurables. Yep.
Measurables. Okay.
Which in the business world, it's got to have a number. It's got to have a number, or it's got to have a measurable. It doesn't. It doesn't at the moment. But it's also scary to break something that's to change something that's not broken.
Yeah, if it works for you, we've had lots of conversations about, hey, if it's working for you, you know, do you really want to change it? Okay, so we can give our listeners some sort of takeaway. This is something that we haven't talked about off mic, so let's hope we've got some answers.
Oh no!
Is how does maybe we look at how we arrived into our very different places of using fear, uncomfortableness, whatever we want to call it. How does one decide or have a good stab at what works for them? How do we, you know, we've talked about using it. How do we get there?
So that's super interesting because I think everyone finds it at a different time. If you're not a natural entrepreneur, sometimes you have to force these things. And you're a big bookworm. So you can find some inspiration, etc. I'm not able to absorb the information from books quite like you. So mine has come through an evolution, and it's come through I remember it quite vividly. We lost a customer 7 and 8 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and I asked myself. What I had to ask myself, but in that moment, that's the key bit. It has to be in that moment. Right. You can't replicate the thinking if you're not in a sad or a deep moment or whatever it is. In that moment, I thought to myself, why am I doing this? Why am I going to give it my best tomorrow? And then because I was in a low moment, I turned that into a massive negative in my brain. And I managed to find the thing that I really feared and wanted to ensure never happened. And so the key thing for me, and I remember it vividly, and you know, off mic, I'm sure you even know the scenario, but I went home, I was demoralised. I wanted to please everyone. That's my personality. I want everyone to love and like what it is we do. And they didn't, and that really weighed on me. And I thought to myself, tomorrow, people rely on you. You've got to get up. Do the same again with the same intensity, same excitement, same happy, smiley Jason that hopefully I've become known for. Why do I need to do that? And because I was in a low moment, I managed to see the fear. And then I started reusing, and then it naturally evolved. And at first I thought, I just don't want to fail. I really don't want to fail, which I think is a common misconception, right? Everyone doesn't want to fail. That's not enough. not wanting to fail is not really specific enough for me to light that fire in my stomach. But the key for me was being in that moment, so that I could look at it from we're gonna go into this, I'm sure, in another episode. You have your ego states as a person. If anyone knows about this, they'll know what I'm saying. You have your adult ego state, your parent ego state, and your child. When you're fearful and when you're super excited, you drop into your child ego state. That's the little child in you. It's only when
I'm pretty sure you're in that state constantly, Jason.
Hey, maybe so. When I'm in that child ego state, or when I was at that particular moment, I could see fear very clearly.
Yep.
And now I've got a healthy, I think, in the day-to-day relationship with it, because I've recognised it and I can dip in and out of it. The key word there is willingly using your fear.
I don't think anyone's advocating a perpetual state of fear.
So what about yours?
So
how did you find it? Have you always had it? I've got so many questions on this.
So I think the fear, I just took that fear of, hey, this is what drove me in the first instance of running this business, is leaving it all behind, going out on your own there and having to make it. So I just replicated it. There wasn't an awful lot of thinking behind my fear. I just went, this is what I experienced here and it worked. Let's replicate that. And it was largely for me around, it was the fear of failing when you first start a business is, am I going to have somewhere to live and all of those kind of things. That's what drives that fear. So I
always thought the fear was me not being here, by the way.
that as well. So I've attempted to replicate that. And I guess what it also does is every time you're in that comfortable state now of your bills come out on the 2nd of the month. Every time those bills come out, I guess there's a little endorphin rush of I've done it this month, and then you're on to the next. So it's definitely not a perpetual state of fear. It happens around certain times of the month, but it's enough to continue to drive out of that uncomfortable.
And do you have a long-term one as well, or you're very much in the here and now? Next month, because you would think you're a salesman if you're working on monthly cycles like that. I've got to hit the end of the month target. Got to hit the end of the month target.
No, we're getting deep there, but because I guess my long-term fear has always not been not making your parents proud. I think that's a common one.
Yep.
For me, it's not enough to go out and drive it's not a driving force for me.
Yep.
I think it's a perpetual fear that a lot of people have, but for me that kind of long-term fear doesn't create what I need to create growth within a business.
And that's not because it's not valid, right? But you've got to work out which one actually lights a fire up you.
Yeah.
You need something that it doesn't mean it's not valid, doesn't mean it isn't a fear. You just got to find the one. It doesn't mean it's less important to you, but each of our brains work differently, and your short-term fear, I see it, means you work silly hours. My long-term fear means I do that. So I would love, and not to jump too far in, but how did you work out that the short-term fear was the one that drove you and not the long-term? Getting quite complicated there. But.
Yeah, no, I haven't necessarily thought too much about this. I just saw something that had worked and I rinsed and repeated.
Okay.
I think my long-term fears shape me as an individual.
Okay.
And we don't have enough time on this episode, but I was really hoping we were going to get into historic pain. And so many entrepreneurs use being bullied or something that happened in their childhood to drive them as a person. Very easy to take fear, to take something that's happened in your past and continuously you view it as a negativity. And this could literally go anywhere in terms of, are we conditioning our young people as a society to, I guess, fear is rather than to lean into fear.
And on that, we probably don't. We could start a 4-hour episode on this. But fear, sadness, there's many words that go onto that list, have connotations of they're bad.
Yeah.
They're bad in unhealthy doses. Sometimes I love, my partner calls it a sad day. I'll have a sad day. I'll just feel a little bit low. I'll just have a day. I'll just do very little because it makes me appreciate the great days. And
I think that's fair.
as long as I don't think, oh, why are you fit? As long as I don't make the most of it, it's in proportion, right? And so I think the purpose of talking about this is, I know we get to speak with loads of leaders, bosses, business owners, whatever you want to frame it as. Everyone has a fear deep down, and has either A, not realised they're leaning into it, or B, has recognised it and leaned into it.
Yeah, and I think that successful people do have a tendency to lean into it. And so for me, the purpose of this episode was, hey, if you're thinking about jumping into entrepreneurship,
Don't do it. No.
and you're about to make the leap, hopefully some of the things we've talked about give you the ability to lean into that early fear. And
Don't be scared by it. Use it.
Use it. Make it work. And it maybe you're in your journey. Maybe you've hit that dead spot. That you've hit a ceiling. Hey, look back, reel it back. Look deep within yourself. Maybe if you're like Jason, or refer to something that's happened previously. What was your fear in times of good growth?
Yep.
And use those to drive your business forward into the next step.
So you've got to know it or identify it
before you can use it.
You've then got to work out if you want to harness it, because you might be at your goals and you might be happy. If you're not, if you still want to keep going because you're that entrepreneur and you've got to keep getting better and better, then you start using it, and then you just keep leaning into it.
Keep leaning into it.
And I guess adapt maybe a little bit as well.
For sure. I think fears can change. I don't think it's not happened for me.
I was scared of you for a couple of years. So that's
there you go. That's got better. So yeah, maybe that adapts over time. Maybe we'll revisit in a couple of years, see if.
It's about being progressive, right? That fear is progressive.
Yeah, it can change. But be mindful of it. I think that's the purpose of it. Is take it, use it.
But don't fear fear.
Don't fear fear.
It can be a good thing.
And on that note,
you've had enough of me already on episode 1.
I'm going to stop Jason talking at this point, and we'll see you on the next episode.